Hello, everybody. Today we are doing Blood Over Brighthaven by M.L. Wang, independent author, independently published, if I know correctly. And I was pleasantly surprised. I've heard so much about Sword Over Kaigen. I have unfortunately not read it yet, although it's in my library. But I saw this book, and I saw Dark Academia, and I was just like, I'm gonna give this a try. And I was pleasantly surprised by this book. Really satisfied reading this book. So I'm gonna have a lot of positive commentary for this book, and I was kind of surprised by some of the criticisms, but we'll get into that later. Overall, I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, the more I think about it, the more I'm like, I think I should increase it even. But I think I was at 3.75, but I think 4 out of 5 is a great point, and that's a great book. Great book. And you should read this if you want to read Dark Academia that kind of explores the themes of isms. And when I say isms, I mean like sexism, classism, these kinds of things, especially sexism and classism, but does that constructively. And you want academia plot, but with a more dark or grim dark plot. If that would be the best way to put that. If that sounds interesting to you, you're really going to enjoy this book quite a bit. So I think we should start with themes of thought-provokingness, because I've seen some criticisms of this book about the themes being too overt. And the main issue that this book is is working through or exploring or maybe displaying or also articulating would be sexism and classism, but sexism being number one. And it is overt, right? Our main protagonist being female, but we have two main characters we're finding, one female from upper class and one male from lower class. It is overt, but I don't see that as an issue at all. And one of the reasons why is, I mean, the world is over. I mean, if you've been around the world, or even in your own community, you realize that some problems and some issues are significantly overt. What makes it dissatisfying, or what makes people not enjoy it in film or any piece of creativity, is when it becomes preachy. And I was thinking about this, why does something become preachy as opposed to engaging? And it's when the theme comes from a place of righteousness, meaning if it's overt to the point of righteousness, right? And that's not what ML Wang does at all. The themes are overt but complex. And for example, our main protagonist, the female, is dealing with very overt sexism, but she's a complex character. And just her trying to work through and overcome the sexism has other things with it too. So she's trying to overcome sexism, but she's a complex character. She's not just like some righteous character that's the best and she's going to overcome it. No, because she comes from a high class, she's really struggling with classism and racism. And those things kind of meshing together to realize, oh, she's doing some of the same things that she hates in others, right? And so that's why it doesn't feel preachy, and that's why even though it's overt, it doesn't feel dissatisfying or too much or anything like that, is because our characters although they're trying to overcome an ism, they're struggling with their own isms, right? And the protagonist is not perfect. Like, I really like, for example, in overcoming sexism structurally, she is doing something to the women of her own household. I really like that exploration, that overcoming these things means you have to have something almost wrong with you, right? And that there's a cost to that. And I really like these kinds of explorations. And same thing with the classism, though it wasn't as much with the other character, with the classism, but also that exploration, he's also a bit of a complex character, right? So growing up in the lowest class, some different types of selfishness that comes with that. Like, the characters are complex, so it makes these themes more thought-provoking and less preachy, and it's really much more how it is in the real world, complex. And that's what the author was exploring, is what does that mean structurally when you try to overcome it. And if you're dealing with sexism from an upper class, if you're on the highest class, and yeah, just like those things kind of meshing together, I personally thought that those themes coming together were really enjoyable to read and were not preachy at all. Were not um, like this righteous sense of one's ism over the other, or the author having like an agenda. Not that at all. Like, I don't usually say that, but cast that criticism out the window. That's people being way too sensitive and way too, I don't know what the word is, like wanting to see, like just looking for an issue, right? And I saw one critique was saying, oh, it's just a upper class woman dealing with life problems. And it's like, yeah, that's what makes it interesting, is you have an upper class woman dealing with a sexist made art academic or society, and because she's from the upper class, she has some unintentional racism and unintentional classism, and it affects how she perceives things and how she puts down other people, right? So that because our characters here are a bit more complex, these issues are really interesting to read. And I would add one more thing, is that the theme of good intentions don't mean good outcomes. It's thoroughly explored here, and I really enjoyed that. And part of it, maybe I read this just after finishing the Sun Eater series, and I've just been really dissatisfied with character arcs. And this book was so satisfying in terms of our character arcs, without spoiling the ending, that it was perfect. Like, it was not a happy ending, that's for sure, depending on how you view it, but at least individually for our characters. So that's why I was saying it's a darker plot, that the ending is very satisfying, and that these themes leading to that, like those creating more hardships, and the more you understand, the more that the characters kind of mess up. And I don't know, like these themes were really enjoyable for me to read, even though that they were overt. I hope it makes sense what I'm trying to say. So for themes and thought-provokingness, and again, I would add, it's like when a book is that overt, you're always afraid that it's not going to be thought-provoking. And I've really liked it, really, that more in-depth exploration of what that means to overcome these isms, and how do those different isms really affect who we are unintentionally. Like we might not know some of those things that are inside of us in our place in society, right? So, and how society might not be ready, even though you feel you might be doing the right thing, not everybody's ready for the right thing to be done. So yeah, there's just so many cool depths of exploration there. So I would definitely encourage everybody to read this book if you're a fantasy fan. And it's a very fresh academia plot. I mean, I would have been a little bit tired of doing the same old going to school, Harry Potter, these kinds of things. No, it's not that at all. It's much darker, and it's refreshing to read that there's a cost to magic, right? There's a definitive cost to magic. So that was very much enjoyable to read. And that will go into characters, which I gave 4 out of 5. There's not the side characters, I would say, kind of get the job done, although there's not a lot, but they are a little bit cookie cutter. So this really falls under the 2 protagonists, which again, they are complex. Their actions and behaviors are justified, and that means their endings are justified and paid off. And again, when you're reading this, you're like, when you're first reading this, you're like, oh, here comes the young female who's going to overcome the sexist society, and then you're like, oh no, she's egotistical. And there's outcomes to this ego. There's negative outcomes to this. There's consequences to these kinds of decisions. And even there's consequences for her ignorance because she's from a higher class. There's ignorance to her racism that she has against the lower class. And that kind of slow realization and that internal battle and internal grief almost and there being a consequence for her wanting to be the best and her wanting to overcome these structures. There's consequences for that. It's not just her family being super happy for her. Like, yeah, there's some cool in-depth exploration. And for the other protagonist, who's from the lower class, it wasn't just a good guy from the lower class that's gonna hoorah, like, no, like he has some flaws of his own. Both characters are flawed, and both are trying to overcome different structural and internal strife with how they've been living through. And yeah, it's really, really enjoyable to read. And plot, which was 4.25 out of 5, awesome plot, really, really strong. Again, really satisfying ending. Like, oh my goodness. Compared to like some of the books I've read recently, it was a super satisfying ending. I did not expect it to go that way, especially because based on some of the happy endings I've been reading lately, but I did not expect that ending, and it was so gratifying, and it's so much based on like the character's characteristics, right? I mean, just the main protagonist, she's just, it's the perfect ending for her, like really, really, and it's like to the core of good intentions don't mean good outcomes, right? And same thing for the other character, right? Like, it wasn't a happy ending for anybody involved, so, but it was a satisfying ending, absolutely. And so the plot, like the magic is well done. At first it was a little bit hard for me to wrap my head around it, because it's a bit technical, but not in a negative way. But once I was understanding, so there's not a lot of depth to it, but it's a really cool system. I don't think I've quite read that system, but mostly that the system is based on expenditure of magic, and they're like and magic being explored in the different themes of sexism, racism, classism. Those were satisfying, and the plot is very fast paced. I was surprised by how fast I was moving, and I wouldn't even say it was so much action, but I read through this thing quick. Like, the pacing was great. I don't know why, but I can't quite put my finger on it, but the pacing was great. I really, really, really enjoyed the pacing. I flew through this book, and like there doesn't feel like there's any wasted pages. The book starts off on a brutal note, and that kind of sets the tone. I like the tonality. It's definitely, again, a dark academia book, and our character, like, I'm glad that you're not getting the character rising through the academia, right? It's like, no, our character is already one of the best students. It's just more that she's kind of establishing herself in, let's say, the PhD world, right? That tone was very refreshing. That it's like, okay, she's trying to do what she's supposed to be doing amongst the other best ones. So, and that was and the revelations and how she's learning and how he's learning and the relationship building, and those things were surprisingly really enjoyable to read and really fast paced. Some of the other like small characters are like, whatever, but again, the plot has consequences, and that's something that I keep seeing missing in a lot of places. I don't know why. I thought people learned from Game of Thrones, but this book had consequences for their actions tied to the themes. That is at its core what I loved most about this plot. Prose and dialogue I thought was the weakest, but still 3.75 out of 5. Really great. I don't know why. I would very well written. I'm not going to say that it was poorly written or anything like that. Obviously, 3.75 out of 5. But I think there were some. I think some key moments could have, like throughout the middle, could have hit a little bit harder for me if it was just, especially with the dialogue. Sometimes the dialogue, not between the two main characters, but sometimes the side character, like the other mages, felt a little bit too evil-y sometimes, is how I say it, based on how complex everything else is. And I guess you have that in all types of world, but that was the thing that bothered me a little bit while reading through this. It's like, okay, our characters are complex, and that reminds me of another theme where, you had this guy who you thought all along was like the good guy, like the good non-sexist guy, but he actually had his own, let's say, his own intentions and his own motivations that weren't necessarily negative, right? But you still had to appreciate. And so I think notes like that could have hit a bit harder, and just with some descriptions in general, especially in conjunction with the magic. And to go along with the themes, I definitely had a high emotional impact reading that ending. I was invested in our two main characters. I was invested in the world. I was invested in the outcome of this world, which was cool to see. Along with those themes, how are these characters going to overcome these themes? So 4.25 out of 5 easily for the emotional impact side as well, with the themes and thought-provokingness. So definitely well written. And for world building, I gave that 4 out of 5, and that's mostly due to the magic system as being the main occupier as a plot device. Was really cool to see, but there were some elements of it that I would have liked to have seen explore a little bit more, particularly with the different sects and religions that were formed, that were kind of hinted at in the book, that people believe different things. So I love theology and fantasy and sci-fi, so I would have loved to see more of that. And the world building was super, super solid, and the magic, how it was integrated with the world, excellent. But in terms of history and these kinds of things, they could have been, that was more great for plot, but not maybe as great for world building. But still, hey, 4 out of 5 is still really, really great. Leaves me to enjoyment, which I gave 4.25 out of 5. I recommend this book really to, I would say this is a great starter fantasy book. I really believe that if I make a list in the future of top 10 books to read as starter fantasy, on the darker side, you have your Aragons of the world. I'm trying to think of other great starter fantasy Blade. Maybe Trader's Blade, maybe. I don't know. I mean, you're not going to put Way of the Kings in there or anything like that. But this is a great starter fantasy, absolutely. So 4.25 out of 5. I really recommend this. Let me know what you guys think. But I thoroughly enjoyed that. Let me know what you guys think.